subscribers. That is crazy. We just started and you guys are going above and beyond for me. So thank you guys so much for all the love and support. I'm so appreciative for you all. So shout out to you guys. Welcome to the family. We need a family name. So if anybody has any ideas, please leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Today we have another true crime. Another true crime case. This is the murder of Laci Peterson. It was actually a case. Sorry, I'm getting so serious now, but I realized I was smiling because I was still giddy about the thing I was just talking about. No, we're getting serious now. This is a serious case. Get serious, girl. Okay. The murder of Laci Peterson, a case that captured widespread media attention, occurred in 2002. Laci was 8 months pregnant with her son, Connor Peterson, when she went missing in Modesto, California on Christmas Eve. On December 24th of 2002, in Modesto, California, the disappearance of 27-year-old Laci Peterson would set in motion one of the most high-profile murder cases in U.S. history. Laci, who was 8 months pregnant with her son Connor, vanished from her home while her husband, Scott Peterson, claimed to have been at a nearby marina fishing. What followed would be a tragic and complex tale of deceit, media frenzy, and a brutal crime that would leave a nation searching for answers. On December 24th of 2002, Laci Peterson, who was a well-loved woman, was last seen around 9:30 a.m. on Christmas Eve at her home in Modesto. She had been planning to attend a Christmas Eve dinner at her mother's house later in the day. But later that day, Scott had called Laci's mom, Sharon, to see if she was at her house. She was like, no. And he goes, well, she's missing. And she's like, missing? What do you mean missing? Just call her friends and see if they've seen her. Like, Sharon was kind of like taken aback by that because she's like, why is he automatically already assuming she's missing? Like, you haven't seen her in a couple hours. Like, just see where she is, you know? It ends up, like, he's like, no. Like, you know, she's missing, whatever. We can't find her. Her friends haven't seen her. She's missing. So Ron, who was Laci's stepdad, called police to explain that she was missing. He was like, my son-in-law was playing golf at 9:30 in the morning. My daughter, who's 8 months pregnant, took her dog for a walk in the park. The dog is home on a leash, but my daughter is not home. Later that night, a detective came down to talk with Scott. The detective described Scott as being calm, very polite, answering all of his questions. Scott had told him that he went fishing for the day, and when he came home, he didn't find her. Scott took the detective into the bedroom. He was like, hey, look, here's Laci's purse. Let me take it off the hook and show you inside too, and look, everything's still in here. The detective ended up looking at Scott's car and saw that in the it was a truck, so in the bed there was like a big tarp, and there was huge like umbrellas as well. And the umbrellas were like the big umbrellas that you would put outside on your, you know, your patio or something. And they were all in the truck bed or whatever. Scott then shows the detective his parking stubs for fishing. The time he launched the bow, he showed him a bag from Big Five, which I'm not really sure what Big Five is, but it's like a store of sorts. And I think it's like a fishing store. He showed him his fishing license that he got on December 20th and a purchase of the fishing lures. He did tell one of the officers or one of the detectives that he was using a big silver lure that day, but the big silver lure was still in the package. So detectives were like, well, it's a little suspicious. It's kind of weird. But Scott again explained that at 8 a.m. he woke up, was like, hey, I'm leaving the marina. He left her a super detailed voicemail that the detectives overheard. Like, hey honey, I'm leaving, blah blah blah, this time, this place, blah 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 blah. Very detailed voicemail. He comes back home and he sees the dog running around with a leash. So he's like, that's weird. He takes off his clothes, all of his clothes from the day. He throws them in the washing machine, does a load of laundry with just his clothes, drinks himself a glass of milk, and then calls Sharon and says, hey, Lacy's missing. This was super bizarre because he also told neighbors that he went golfing and that Lacy was missing, but then he told Lacy's parents he went fishing. So it's kind of like a weird, like, did you go golfing, did you go fishing, like, what's the story, you know, what's that, give us, what is it? Two different sports here. Is fishing a sport? I feel like it is, right? Fishing is a sport. We'll call it a sport. So, also, what was weird was that nobody knew that he had a boat at all. Like, nobody knew Scott had a boat. Nobody besides Scott knew that he had a boat, which was a super big red flag. It's like, how does nobody know you have a boat? So, detective was like, hey, Scott, you should really take a polygraph test just to eliminate the fact that you're a suspect. Scott originally was like, yes, I'm willing to. And as he's saying this, he's like in the chair, he's leaned back, he's super chill, he's got his hands in his pocket. He was just like not acting like his pregnant wife was missing. He was being like way too chill. And detectives found that to be another red flag. They were like, this is just, you're not acting like somebody who has a missing wife with your son, you know. It was very big red flag. So as soon as Scott reported Lacy missing, local police began searching for clues. Family, friends, and volunteers joined the effort to find her, but fearing the worst, the search was heavily publicized and the case quickly drew national attention. Many speculating about Scott's possible involvement. Despite the efforts, no signs of Lacy was found in the early days of the search. During the media frenzy, Scott didn't engage at all with the media to try and find his missing wife. Lacy's friends and family were all very anxious and panicked, and Scott just didn't seem to have that sense of urgency. He also then refused to take the polygraph, even though originally he was like, yeah, I'll take it. Now he's like, actually, I'm not gonna take it anymore. So one day, Sharon, Lacy's mom, had pulled Scott to the side and was like, we need to talk. We need to talk. So she starts asking him questions about Christmas Eve. She's like, hey, so what happened on Christmas Eve? Like, tell me everything. He honestly was super vague with her and didn't really give her much detail. So she was like, alright, well, why did you never tell anybody you bought a boat? He's like, well, I actually didn't tell anybody because I wanted to surprise Ron. I wanted to be like, oh my gosh, surprise. And she's like, it's not Ron's boat. Like, he's not gonna care either way. Like, it's weird. And then she's like, well, also, why didn't you take the polygraph test? And he was like, well, I just can't take it. Like, I'm just way too upset. I just can't take it. So she was like, alright, I mean, bizarre, definitely weird, but she honestly didn't think much of it. She kind of just wrote it off. She loved Scott as a part of her family, and she was like, well, maybe this is just how he's grieving. Like, I don't want to judge him for maybe not acting the way that I would personally act. In one of Lacy's journal entries, like a diary, she wrote, Scott felt the baby move for the first time. I felt relieved because I didn't want to be the only one experiencing such a beautiful moment. Scott didn't show a whole lot of excitement, but I know was, while detectives were looking at Scott's boat, they noticed something weird. They found an anchor with no rope, which is weird because an anchor should have the rope because you would throw the anchor into the water. So it's like, that's weird. It doesn't even have a rope. They also found what appeared to be traces of another anchor, even though Scott said he only had one anchor. He only had one that he made, but there was traces of another anchor. And then they found a pair of needle nose pliers with the big long black hair wrapped around it. So they're like, yeah, this is getting really weird. Like, they're really starting to suspect Scott a lot more. On December 30th of 2002, detectives received a tip. Amber Fry called into the tip line where she reports Scott was her boyfriend and had been for months. She explained that she met Scott in November of 2002 when Amber's friend introduced her to Scott, who claimed he was looking to meet the one. Amber was a single mom, and so this was exactly what she was looking for. She described him as nice and easy to talk to. He was very kind to her daughter, and she ended up later inviting him to her holiday party. He did accompany her to her holiday party. He bought her like 3 dozen roses. Like, he went all out for her. But shortly after, the same individual who had set them up bumped into Scott's coworker, who had casually ended up talking about Scott's wife. So that friend didn't realize that Scott was married. So they end up calling Scott and they're like, hey, you need to tell Amber about the fact that you have a wife, or I'm gonna tell her. So it's either you or me, you know? So on December 9th of 2002, Scott had called Amber to see if she'd be home and that he needed to tell her something. He said that he lied about being married. He had lost his wife. So this was the first holiday without her. He started crying and apologizing a lot, to which Amber consoled him, and she didn't pry. She didn't know why his wife had died, but she was like, well, when he's ready, he's gonna let me know, so I'm not gonna like push him or pry into this anymore. So a couple weeks later from that, she gets a call from her friend who had a printout of a news article. There was no picture of Scott, but there was a description of him and his missing pregnant wife, and that's when Amber decided to call the tip line. Detectives tell her to, if they're able to tap into her phone, and just for her to kind of play along, even though she was obviously super upset, like she's just been bamboozled by Scott, and she's like, oh my gosh, like this guy, was this guy the reason that his wife disappeared? Like she was like, oh, I need help, So detectives are like, hey, let's have us tap into your phone, you play along. And she's like, yeah, I'll do it. So they also at that same time tapped into Scott's phone as well. Scott was lying to Amber about traveling coming up. In reality, he was attending things for his wife, Lacy. So for instance, like one of the times he said he was in Paris for a fireworks or like the New Year's or something like that. It was something along that sort. And he was actually at a candlelight vigil. I forget how to say it. For Lacy. So like a candlelight ceremony for Lacy. Around the same time that Lacy went missing, though, there was a burglary at the neighbor's house. So people started suspecting that maybe the burglars had something to do with Lacy's disappearance. A recap of that situation was the neighbor's home was broken into between Christmas Eve to December 26th was the time frame. The neighbors had left their home at 10:30 a.m. on the 24th, and they came home at 4:30 on the 26th. So on the 24th, there was a suspicious van found near the neighbor's So they were really like, absolutely not. Like, we want no part of this. So, like I said, since the burglars knew they were going to jail, they did request a polygraph. They were basically begging for it. They're like, please let me get a polygraph test. They ended up proving their innocence. They were cleared. Their polygraph, came out that they had nothing to do with the disappearance, right? And they had an alibi on the 24th as well, that they were with their family. So they ended up getting cleared with that. January 3rd of 2003, a detective called Scott to try and stir something out of him. So he showed him a picture of him and Amber at the Christmas party. He had printed it in black and white and basically like slid it across the table and was like, so we got a tip. And he's like, well, what do you think of it? What do you have to say about this? And Scott picks it up and he's like, well, you don't think this is me, do you? It's so clearly you, Scott. Yes, we do think it's you because it is you and it looks just like you. Like, because it is. It's literally you a month ago, dude. Like, it's you. Of course we think it's you because it is. A few days later, he called Amber and he confessed. He said he lied to Amber about traveling, explained that Lacy, his wife, was gone missing and he's been searching for her. Detectives start to believe that Lacy is in the bay, in the marina. So they start searching for her. As they were tracking Scott's truck, so they were they're at the bay and they're searching for her, like all boats and whatever. As they were there, they're tracking Scott's truck and they follow where he's going and all of that. And Scott obviously doesn't know that, right? But they see that Scott drove to the bay and would look around for a couple minutes and go back. And he did that 4 times. He didn't talk to police. He didn't ask questions about what they were looking for. Nothing, but he would go, look around, see if probably if they were finding anything, and then go back to where he was. Detectives found an object while searching in the bay. It did end up only being an anchor, though. Unfortunately, they didn't really find anything else. But Scott's mom had called him and left him a voicemail, and she goes, basically she said something like, so detectives had found an anchor, and obviously, like, they didn't find Lacy, of course. Like, I knew they wouldn't. I forgot how she worded it. It was something like that. I wasn't exactly like that, right? But she was like, they found an anchor and not Lacy, and you hear him in the background because remember his phone is tapped and he's like, whew, as if he is a sense of relief. February 18th of 2003, detectives decide to search the home again of Scott. They are trying to see if anything had changed from the time they originally searched the house to now, and they did notice that the house was very cluttered. It was cluttered, things were moved all around. Scott had sold Lacy's car, and he was looking to sell the home as well, and then he used the nursery as almost like a storage facility, so it didn't really seem like he was expecting his wife and kid to come back home. It was very bizarre. On April 13th of 2003, nearly 4 months after Lacy's disappearance, a breakthrough came in the body of a woman later identified as Laci Peterson and her unborn son, Connor, washed up on the shore. The discovery confirmed the worst. Lacy had been murdered. Connor's body was found separately, indicating that he had been born prematurely before death. Detectives believed that Scott had either suffocated Lacy or strangled her between the 23rd or the 24th, wrapped her in that tarp that they found, dragged her through the house while, the house was all tile, and then there was a rug, Lacy in the back of his truck. He covered the body with those big umbrellas, took her to the warehouse where the boat was, put Lacy's body on the boat, drove to the bay, and dropped her body in the water, expecting her to never, come up. No one would find her, is what he was expecting. On April 18th of 2003, after several months of investigation and mounting evidence, including DNA found at the crime scene and inconsistencies in his alibi, Scott Peterson was arrested on April 18th of 2003. They believe that Scott was going to flee, as when they arrested him, his car had $15,000 in cash, 4 to 5 cell phones, several knives. He had Viagra, a shovel, rope, cooking grill, credit cards of not only him, for him, in his name, but also his family's credit cards. And he had his brother's ID that looked just like Scott with his new hair. Scott had changed his hairstyle and had like a goatee, the mustache. And, I don't know, it's like in this area, I think it's a goatee. He had that, and it looked just like his brother, which is kind of weird too. He never had that look before. All of a sudden, you're in San Diego on the border near Mexico, and you have all this stuff. He claims he was not trying to do that. His family claims he was not trying to do that as well, but I think personally that's a little suspicious. That's just me. The trial of Scott Peterson began in 2004, drawing intense media scrutiny. Prosecutors argue that Scott had planned and executed the murder of Lacy and Connor, pointing to the evidence of his affair with Amber Fry and his lack of concern for Lacy's well-being. The defense, however, presented a different story, suggesting that Scott had not killed his wife and that the case against him was circumstantial. The prosecution's case was bolstered by Scott's behavior before and after Lacy's disappearance, as well as the forensic evidence linking him to the crime. Experts testified that Lacy's body had been dumped in the bay after she had been killed, and that her unborn son Connor had died as a result of the same crime. On November 12th of 2004, after months of deliberation, the jury found Scott Peterson guilty of 2 counts of murder: first-degree murder for Laci Peterson and second-degree murder of their unborn son. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection. But on August 24th of 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned Scott's death penalty sentence, citing that his jury was improperly screened for bias against the death penalty, and Scott was resentenced to